All right. Hello, Miss Casino. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Great. I'm fine. I want to thank you so much for letting me sit and observe your first grade class. I really enjoyed it, and I would like to just give you some feedback.
Okay, sure.
Great, great. So first, I want to say that it's clear that you are passionate about teaching and that you really love your students. I mean, I was so impressed that you just always use their names when you had questions or comments, or even with behavioral issues, you always knew the name of every student and you always used it. So, even sometimes when we're stressed, we might forget certain things, but I was impressed that you knew your student's name and you used it as well, because students like that. I just found from the observing just a couple things, two points where I think you could help you improve. One is with
Okay.
the student engagement.
Hmm.
And so I saw that some of the children were not so engaged in the learning where others were, and you had the same children answering the questions. And then
Okay.
also with the table set up with the small group, the second part activity, the children were well behaved in the reading section, but the table session got really chaotic a bit. So it lost a little bit focus. So I want to help you with those two things.
Okay.
The guiding principles that I would like you to think about related to those two is that how can I promote active learning, student engagement during my lessons, the first part. And the second would be, how could the class behavior, could the class behavior problems, specifically during the table session, be the result of not having clearly defined rules, class norms, and rewards consequences? So just think about those two.
Okay.
When it comes to the active learning, student engagement, I think you might want to incorporate some norms in the class if you don't have. So like everyone participates in the class and that they shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes. Some kids might not raise their hand because they might think, oh, I make a mistake, and there's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with making mistakes. And in
Hmm.
fact, that's part of learning. I think you might also want to consider changing your strategy overall. Some research that I found from Nuttall and Lee from 1995 found that students retain information the least when they get verbal only instructions. They
Mm.
retain the most when they get visual instructions. So
Okay.
I was thinking that maybe instead of you reading what you did about the Wright brothers, you might want to incorporate a short age appropriate video before asking or during asking. I'll go through in detail about how you might do that, but incorporate that video during the lesson.
Okay.
And you could as well create your own short video, just something that's age appropriate for first graders.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I
Okay.
probably go on like YouTube or YouTube Kids or something.
Exactly. And you could even put together different portions of, make a portion of video, maybe incorporate some of the vocabulary lessons in a fun way that you're trying to teach as well, and put those
Hmm.
together for a short video.
Oh, okay.
You had set it up for reading, but I don't think you necessarily have to have it set up where everyone's sitting in a reading group. In fact, I would actually start the process more as a small group activity, all of it as a small group activity.
Hmm.
And this, maybe some of the transition from the reading to the table might have affected as well their behavior in the second part, because maybe they got them excited as well.
Hmm. Okay.
So so also just to incorporate that class participation, you may want to think about including that as part of the grade, how the kids are participating in class, and mention that to them, that they will be graded on their participation. Even in the first grade, in some ways you can help with teaching them how to participate. It doesn't have to be a big portion, but a small
Or
portion.
should I like do like some type of like reward or something for participation?
Yes, you could give reward extra credit. It could be something that you don't take away, but you may get extra credit from, on the grades if you are participating, the more you participate, for example.
Okay. Oh, good. Yeah, I
Yeah,
actually can incorporate that. Yeah.
yeah. So, okay, you have implemented a process for raising the hands. I wanted to mention that, but then sometimes you ignored the kids who were raising the hands and just kind of like answered the ones who just spoke. So just
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you're being consistent with what you are doing.
Mm-hmm.
you know, with the table setup, you want to also incorporate some norms when they're sitting at the table on an assignment, that they're always on task, that their eyes are on the task, quiet voice. So, you know, you can only hear the group that should only hear, the group that they're in should be only hearing you.
Mm-hmm.
And so then also from a strategy that I found with Art and Science of Teaching, it was with Marzano, 2007. There's an idea that you can separate the kids into 3 different groups. You can give a card, an A card, B card, C card. When they play so in each group, there's an A student, a B student, and a C student. You can play the video on the Wright brothers, but then have that video cut into 3 portions,
Mm-hmm.
A portion, B portion, C portion, and then have the A portion play it, stop, and then ask questions for each of the kids in the A groups, and the A's in each of the groups,
Okay.
questions. So that way you're checking to make sure everyone is participating.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's a fun one.
Mm-hmm. Then you may want to incorporate vocabulary questions in there in a fun way. So then you would ask, and then you would, after you've asked the basic questions, then you would go to the next level questions in the group, like what would happen if they decided to stop doing because they failed. You might want to think about that as a big group, and then you have them fill out the form together in their groups. So they're really working in their groups.
Mm-hmm.
I would just recommend that you kind of like break that out. So the week 1, when you're trying these new strategies, discuss the norms, the new norms with the kids, discuss the new procedures with the kids, make sure everyone's on board. Week 2 and week 3, you would practice with your next lesson plans with taking these tips.
Mm-hmm.
And then in week 4, I would come back and evaluate whether it worked or not.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have any questions while you're setting it up, you can always call me. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you so much for the feedback. Yeah,
Yes.
I really will use the strategies that you mentioned in my classroom.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Miss Wagner.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you.
All right, so thank you for making me observe your class, your 12th graders. I really enjoyed the activity that they were doing, working about, learning about themselves as far as making a poster about their family and what they wanted to do as their future career. So I will be discussing with you some strategies I thought that you should incorporate in your classroom as far as your teaching. So, so let's get started. I liked how you did recap your prior lessons about rules, and you went over the details of what you expected from your students, and how they had a choice in their own punishment. So according to an article that I've read by Trent Lurcher, 2012, is to make students accountable. So your students are now responsible for their actions by having them sign the contract. I also like how you gave them a minute or 2 to sign. So their contract. One suggestion for this is to communicate to students on how they will be handing their contract to you. I also noticed that you did use a wooden stick. Personally, for me, I wouldn't use a wooden stick. Maybe you could use like a laser. Maybe that would have been a bit more appropriate. 5 minutes introducing the activity, and then 15 minutes to break out into groups, rather than have them just sit down and like do note taking for the whole entire period. Back to the contract, a transition would have been nice to get the students settled and listening. Maybe another countdown you could use, or maybe a sound maker such as a bell to grab the students' attention. So maybe you can like, ring the bell once, and then students would be like, would focus their attention to you. They know that they should not be talking when you're trying to give out a lesson. Yeah.
Okay.
And physically move rather than sit down. Yeah. And of course, smile and show enthusiasm. You want to get your students excited about what you're teaching. According to Emma McDonald, setting the tone, you want to use a firm and steady tone, and firm doesn't mean loud. So smile a lot, like smile and get, like, they'll feel it. Like the students will definitely feel how you teach, and they'll definitely be engaged. Yeah. And I noticed in the PowerPoint to use more visuals. I can see that I see that you're teaching international students, so high school students, 12th graders, and a best way for them to understand the concept would be to show visuals, and they can,
Okay.
yeah, can make
Okay.
connections. Yeah.
Great. It's great
And
advice.
yeah, and so those are like actually my two coaching focus would be to use your visuals in the presentation and to break up the activity rather than just explaining it in one sitting. And then
Okay.
some a reflective question that you may want to think about when you're teaching you know, your high school student, your 12th graders. The first one is, are the relationships I have with my students conducive to creating a collaborative culture focused on learning? So yeah, you may
Okay.
want to yeah, just break the students into groups.
Mhm.
And then also think about your demeanor and your attitudes towards your class, you know, that
Yes.
make students learning effective. So again, like I said, they can tell if you're very excited about your separately,
Mhm.
and have the norms, like, you know, I saw students raising their hand, rather than using the stick to point out the students, you know, you can use your hand
Mhm.
and be like, you know, okay, yeah, go, and use their names too, instead
Yes.
of just like pointing it out, you know, you
Yeah.
say you're their first name.
Mhm.
Yeah. And also during the discussion on the mini presentation, you know, you want to give specific examples of what they need in their what is needed. And also a suggestion I would say about asking questions, like, you know, for checking for understanding, rather than saying anybody have questions, maybe we can reword that
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
what questions do you have? So it kind of opens it up for students to respond. And if nobody responds, then that's fine. You can be like, okay, moving on.
Okay.
Um, During the explanation of mini lessons, you did tell the students to put their pencil down. I think that would have been appropriate for students to actually be taking notes. A
Mhm.
lot of students will forget what you talk about. And when discussing, you know, when you're talking about hobbies and what their hobbies were, have them raise their hands rather than shouting an answer out. Um, uh, and also you're explaining to them like, oh, you can talk about like, oh, I am good at blank. You kind of mentioned like, I'm good at whatever. Like, it kind of
Mhm.
showed that you
Mhm.
didn't really care about what they're gonna say. So
Okay.
maybe you can take this opportunity to share something about yourself, so students know a little about you, you know.
Mhm.
And in the Mr. Tomorrow activity, my suggestion would, again, to not use the stick. I could see that you were twirling it a little bit.
Mhm.
It was a bit distracting, and
Yes.
so
Sorry.
so maybe, yeah, you can like eliminate the stick. And
True.
another thing I've noticed is the stay quiet. You said stay quiet a few times. Maybe we can incorporate a noisemaker again, like the bell, to
Mhm.
let students know that you are going to be talking, or even the method that you are doing. You know, you're like saying 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah,
Mhm.
that could also work. Um, Slowing down and pacing yourself, and make sure that you include pauses. So when you're talking about your lesson, make sure you pause and look at each student individually. Pausing will cause students to look up and catch their eye and grab their attention. So you are actually reinforcing the message without saying a word.
Okay.
Yeah, or that shows the, you know, your 12th graders how much they had time left on the screen.
Mhm.
So just make sure that you give enough time for your students to finish what they're doing, and then transition into the next activity. So it kind of seemed like they were being rushed, and that they wanted to they needed a little bit more time on working their lesson.
Mhm.
So
Okay. Great.
yeah, and then yeah, you know, another thing I can also suggest is see if you've made any changes as far as your teaching goes, and if you've
Mhm.
reinforced any of the suggestions that I've been making. So I'll be continually checking up with you week by week to see what progress you've made. And then
Mhm.
at the final week and week or the end of the month, I can discuss with you what improvements you made, or if there's any strategies or strategies that you should incorporate in your classroom. So
Okay,
other than
great.
that, you've been well. You've been good.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Do you have any questions for me?
At the moment, no, but I really thank you for your feedback and I will work to implement them.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mrs. Reina. I can't wait to follow up with you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.